Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This week on the Sweetwater Minute, we have the pleasure of being joined by Tony Levin. Tony,
Hi.
Thanks for coming in.
Hey,
Appreciate you
thanks.
being here.
Good to be here.
You are here doing some work in the Sweetwater studios.
In the studios, there are a bunch of people learning all about studio techniques, and I'm just the bass player plunking the bass notes, and we're on a break now, and by now they've learned that I really don't play very well bass, but it can be fixed later in the mix.
I don't think that's the case at all. I'm sure they're anxious for you to get back, so we won't keep you too long.
Well, it's okay.
Right. So you've played in so many great projects, so many great albums. It's hard to know where to start. But let's go back to the beginning. You're from Boston originally?
I'm from Boston, yep.
And how did you get started playing bass?
The earth was still cooling, and I said, Mom, I want to play the bass. I don't really know why I started bass, but I started very early, about 10 years old, and started playing in bands, and I played classical, and I went to music school at Eastman and played jazz, and ended up most comfortable, I guess, in rock and progressive rock, and along the way I was very lucky. Got some good jobs.
Right.
Got to play some great music with some great people, mostly by luck.
Well, your credits are amazing. So what was the first project that really stood out for you as being something where you felt like you'd really...
You know what, when you're a player and when you're in the inside looking out, you don't look at it that way. Now, I only think about the history of what I've done, like, oh, you played with it, when I'm doing interviews, when people ask about it. Really, musicians were mostly the same. Whatever you're doing now is like really important. You might not think it's Pink Floyd and it's going to sell a lot of records, but it's really important. And it occupies all your attention and all your passion. So the first band I was in was called the Cavaliers, and we were 11 or 12 years old, making $5 total for the band.
Sure.
Playing grammar school dances. And I was passionate about that. Am I more passionate about a Peter Gabriel show? Probably I am. But
the stakes are a little higher than the $5.
Yeah, I can't say what's the best. It's all been great.
Right.
If the musicians are good, if you're allowed to play good music, you're pretty lucky to be there, at least in my opinion.
Right. So you had moved to New York, and did you start doing sessions there, or were you playing in bands first when you first arrived in town?
I went to school in upstate New York at classical, and then I actually might never have left Rochester, but in one of those funny coincidences, I was called to join the Buddy Rich Band, and I got rid of all my stuff and went on the road to join them, and there was a change in plans, and they didn't need me or want me. And I was just at sea.
Right.
And with my bass. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to go to New York, tomorrow's the day. And I just kind of went to New York, and I probably never would have. And gradually, through luck, got established there and became a studio musician. Coincidentally, a few years later, Buddy Rich came through town, the Buddy Rich Band, and they needed a bass player, and they called me and hired me for that.
Nice.
Just for the one stand in New York. Yeah, it was kind of ironic.
Yeah, right.
I would be doing this, but I don't think really now I want to go on the road with this band.
Right.
And after a few years as a studio player, I intentionally left to do more touring and live playing, which is really what I prefer, and mostly rock, not so much jazz.
Right. Now, I read that some of that studio work, though, led to connecting with Gabriel. Is that correct?
Yes. Typically, I was just called by the producer to play on Peter's first record, Peter Gabriel, it was called. I didn't know who Peter was. I didn't know who Genesis was. I'm embarrassed to admit.
Right.
And Bob Ezrin, the producer who had used me on many great things, called me, and we made one of those musical connections that's so special that musicians sometimes can make. And to this day, many years later, I'm still playing with Peter. And Robert Fripp was one of the guitar players on that session, and I'm still involved with Robert. So
right.
That was a good day.
Yeah,
Let's call that the best day I've ever had.
Right.
When I met Robert Fripp and Peter Gabriel.
Right.
And
so that led to the connection with King Crimson.
Absolutely. I knew Robert from that session, the 1 month long session, but also we toured with Peter together with Peter's first album.
Nice. Now, when did you start expanding on what you were doing with the bass? Because you had the Funk Fingers.
I'm still planning on expanding it, but really I'm still just playing the bass. Well, next year I'm going to really expand. No, you're right. I played Wooden Sticks, I call the Funk Fingers, and that was actually an innovation, although Peter Gabriel helped me. It was sort of his idea. I had the drummer Jerry Marotta play with drumsticks on the bass strings on the record, on Big Time, the piece Big Time, and on the road I was having a great deal of trouble with the drumstick in my hand trying to play that, and Peter Gabriel suggested to me, why don't you attach drumsticks to your fingers? So really it was Peter's idea. And the other thing I do that's quite unusual is play the Chapman stick, but I am
Right.
by no means the developer of it, nor am I the only player. There are thousands of stick players.
Sure.
I think I'm one of the first, most visible ones who got seen, especially in King Crimson playing, and with Peter Gabriel.
Right.
So I don't know if I've done that much that innovative, but
I think
I do
so.
have fun doing other things than just the normal plucking the strings.
Right. What was the attraction of the stick? Because it's a very different technique.
It is hammer-on, and the year I heard about it was '76, I think, and I heard about it from a lot of people for the reason that at that time I was playing bass with hammer-on. I don't know why. Some drummer showed me this way of playing bass, and I was annoying people at sessions by incessantly practicing like that. And then they heard about this instrument that you play like that, and it sounded interesting, and I got it, and it really worked out well for me. Not only because the technique was familiar, but for me, playing in progressive, unusual situations musically, the fact that it's a little different sound, it still sounds like a bass, the bass side of the stick, but it has a little different texture, very different attack. So I found it very useful in King Crimson, for instance, to get a different sound and a different approach to the same old, what would be the same old parts. So
Right.
It came in handy for me.
Yeah, right.
It still does. And now I'm in a band called Stickmen with almost two stick players. I play stick and Marcus Reuter plays a touch guitar. This is quite similar. And Pat Mastelotto from King Crimson plays drums. And we tour a lot around the world. In fact, let me put in a plug. Our new album called Deep just came out, and that's
Great.
for sale on my website. And when I go home from this, I'll continue practicing for our upcoming tour to promote that album.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. So you have achieved a very high level yourself as a musician, and you work with many wonderful musicians. You know, Peter Gabriel, Robert Fripp, Alan Holdsworth, David Torn, Terry Bozzio, the list just goes on and on and on. From your perspective, what is it that makes a musician special? What is it that allows somebody to get to that level, or what leads to them reaching that level?
Well, I'm not going to even think in terms of myself, but when I listen to players, I've really worked with a lot of great players, and the ones who, or take bass players, because I'm a fan of bass playing and bass players, and I can't help but listen to the great ones. And what really attracts me is when they do something that no one else is doing. So I'm not talking about myself now, but there's some players that can express themselves on an instrument in a different way than anyone. To me, that's almost miraculous, because there's so many people have done it before so well.
Right.
And you grow up hearing them and maybe wanting to be like them and maybe trying to even play their parts. So I'm always most impressed by a band or by a player who just does things differently, his own way, but of course musically valid. And that to me, that reawakens my own passion to try to be progressive and creative, and to try to stop doing what I've been doing for the last few years and try to break out of that and do something new.
Right. Do you have suggestions for musicians who want to develop that for themselves? They want to achieve their own voice on their instrument, and they want to do things that are different, or break out, as you said?
That's a good question. I don't. I think I'm more, I'm looking for somebody to teach me how to do it. I'm not much of a teacher, in fact. For that reason, I don't ever want to be the one to tell some young enthusiastic bass player, here's the way you should do it, here's the way I did it. I don't ever want to do that. So consequently, when I'm asked about bass playing, I almost always find that I don't want to tell anyone anything about how to do it, because I'd rather hear, maybe not the way they're doing it that day, but what they're going to develop. So I don't have any good suggestions.
Okay, no, that's all right. That's all right. But that's a great answer, because I really think sometimes people, take a little different approach to that. But that's great. That's wonderful, wonderful. So you're here in the studios, and there's a workshop going on where people are coming in, and you're playing in the band and laying down the parts. You're here for 3 or 4 days,
Even right now, as I sit here, I am playing. They're saying, "How does he do that? How is he learning the piece?" And
well, I said you were on a high level.
soon they'll learn that I didn't learn the piece yet. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's always exciting. I've been here before, and it's an exciting place, and so much of our industry happens right here in these walls, and it's a pleasure to look around and see. And also, every time I'm here, it's bigger and more.
It keeps growing, doesn't it?
Yeah, more amazing.
Right. Well, we're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by. We really appreciate it.
Hope to be here again.
We hope so. I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.